Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself. Feeling ready to kick your sales into high gear? We're here to help. Check out our sales coaching and consulting services at predictablerevenue.com. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Darius Lahoutifard. He is the founder of the MEDDIC Academy, and we're going to talk MEDDIC, MEDDIC, qualification, a little bit of history. Darius, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Collin.
I'm really excited. I've talked a lot about MEDDIC. We use it. It's, I think, one of my favorite episodes I've recorded. The one I probably talk about on the podcast the most is the Jamie Buss episode, where we talked about how she was forecasting her orders at Zendesk, leading North America sales within 1%. That was one of those episodes that I stopped. Once I finished recording, I stopped everything that I was doing. I took some notes for about 2 hours, and then we started working on implementing it. So much so that I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, who helped you? Who built all this in your Salesforce?" She goes, "Oh, it was David Hong." And he was at a new company now. And so she introduced me, and then we had him on the show a couple of weeks later because secretly I wanted to implement it because the value was so clear. And so, one, thank you for bringing this methodology to everybody. And two, I would love to talk about where did MEDDIC come from? Because I think there's a really interesting story there.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share that. One of the reasons why you connected and it was meaningful for you as a experienced salesperson is because MEDDIC, unlike other methodologies, which have all their goods and bads and everything, they are very solution selling, spin selling. They all have great lessons in them. I've been raised with those methodologies in the late 80s when I started my career. But there is one thing which is fundamentally different between MEDDIC and every other methodology, and it's that MEDDIC has been built ground up. MEDDIC was not built by anyone, not me, not anyone, unlike other methodologies where a very smart guru, sales coach, thinks about something, puts it on the market, writes a book about it, creates a consulting firm, and starts training people with it, which I call a top-down approach, a guru expanding their ideas and rolling it out. MEDDIC is the contrary. It has been practiced, and it has been actually an observation at PTC where the origins of MEDDIC started. It was an observation of what are the best practices of our salespeople. And then only 20 years later, when I wrote the first book on MEDDIC, Always Be Qualifying, during the pandemic, June 2020, that was the first book ever. Or when I founded MEDDIC Academy in 2017, actually 7 years, almost the same month, was in May 2017. It was the first e-learning, first platform related to this type of qualification, yet alone MEDDIC. So that's why I call it has been built ground up, and it was these ideas, the concept. So how did it start? At PTC.
And what was PTC back in the day? Because I wasn't immediately familiar with it when we first started talking.
Yeah, not alone. Many people don't know it, even if I think today is a $3 billion, $2 billion company, headquartered in Boston and founded in 88, I think, and or 88, and introduced, IPO'd in 90. At those days, the number of startups were limited. At those days, I was based in France, and I still remember a VC article, an article about venture capital. A famous management magazine was popularizing what is venture capital, what are these investments. And guess what? The total number of startups funded by VCs in early 90s in France was 10. The table that was in that article could hold 10 lines. So those days, the word startup didn't have the same meaning as today. So I know when I'm recounting these things, my white hair, it shows even more prominently. Getting old. So PTC was introduced, and the reason it's not very well known is because it's really in a huge niche market, one of the biggest niche markets, which is computer-aided design, and nowadays we call it PLM, product lifecycle management. So, you know, a company, any company, especially manufacturing physical product, any company making physical products has a product, customers, investors, management. So ERP is well known because you need to manage your resources and financing. CRM is well known to everybody because you manage your customers' relationship. But the part which is less known to many people is where you manage the product. So PTC is a PLM vendor managing, offering software to manage the product, to create, to design, and to manage the life cycle of a product. They challenge
role.
I'm sorry.
Back when you were at PLM, what was your? Sorry to cut you off there. What was your role at PTC?
Me personally, I was hired as a country manager. I was in another company called Applicon Schlumberger, where the founder of PTC used to be the CTO. He left to PTC and founded the product that he was dreaming of, Sam Gaisberg, founder of PTC. And I was contacted as I was succeeding in France. So I was contacted to run France for PTC. And France for PTC was a very challenging geography. Why? Because PTC has a competitor, even today, that they have never been able to beat. And that is a French company called Dassault Systèmes. And Dassault is probably in the $4 or $5 billion range. And what I'm particularly proud of is that in those years I was running France, we had a higher revenue than Dassault. We were number one in France, while PTC worldwide had still challenges to get there. And
when you say country manager, you're running all the sales, the entire sales team. It's not you're running the country and all the operations. It was specifically related to sales.
Actually, I had responsibilities. A matrix organization with CSMs, sales support, finance, and those things. So yeah, I was really country manager. As the company was growing, the dashed line became less important, and local leaders were more VP sales. But at those years, it was truly a country manager. Yeah.
And so this was your first exposure to MEDDIC or MEDDIC, because it came out of the PTC.
We built it there. We built it there. It was not an exposure to it. It was building it. So what was happening, that the challenge PTC had was that we're in a market where customers don't change easily. For instance, if you are Airbus or Boeing and you are designing an airplane, by contract, you have to keep all your data related to the product for 30 years. That for itself, it's a reason not to easily change your PLM vendor. Mm-hmm. Even for electronics, where the life cycle of a mobile device could be as short as 1 year for us consumers. On the manufacturing side, they need at least to have all these data available for 5 to 10 years. So people don't change. Customers don't change their vendor easily. We had to replace the competitors with the cutting edge product as fast as we could. And we had goals, very aggressive goals, which was doubling every year. Mm-hmm. And we actually did it. We did 40 consecutive quarters of an annual double-digit growth, nonstop. That's huge. And that was probably the first in the history of technology those years. Mm-hmm. That's 10 years of doubling from zero to $1 billion revenue. And that is done kind of thanks to MEDDIC. But MEDDIC we created. So how did we create that MEDDIC there? Is that because of this, we noticed that our challenge is ramping up new salespeople. When you're in a high growth, you want your new sales reps to be trained the most efficiently possible so that they can produce and deliver quota as soon as possible. Instead of waiting on the long enterprise sales, 2-3 quarters, we wanted to have revenue from the first quarter and make quota in the second quarter. And that's what we achieved. Now, how do you do that? We were country managers, global country managers were getting together every quarter in Boston, and we were comparing notes. We were sharing what's working, what's not working. And this is how the foundation of MEDDIC was created, is we need to explain and coach the sales rep that they need to find a champion. So the champion is something which is absolutely necessary in there, or that they need to get metrics. We have absolutely excellent customer metrics. I still remember some of those metrics from those years. Philips Auto Radio in the suburbs of Paris had a factory, and they had managed to reduce, by moving to our solution, to reduce the design time of auto radios from 8 months to 4 months, thanks to our product. Reducing design time, dividing it by 2 means basically dividing more or less the cost of the product by 2. The cost of designing the product by 2. So that's an example of metrics. So we were saying that when we are using this example to one of their competitors, that's revealing. They say, I want it too. That's triggering sales. So let's make it a habit of using metrics, or making a habit of asking in the discovery call, asking, how much do you take to design a product? What's the time to market for your product? What would be the impact? Here are some examples of things, questions that we can ask and business case that we can build. You have a prospect, you're meeting a prospect for the first time and you're in discovery call. You can ask the question, is that's quantifying the pain, is that how much does it take for you to design a new product? Okay, you're given an answer. And then the next is, what if you were able to cut it by 2, divide it by 2, or cut it by just 10%, or just by 5%? And this will, the prospect can give you some answers of, this will be the impact. And then they will say, but it's not just about the cost. There is also another impact, which is time to market. Our products will be on the market faster. So there will be an impact in terms of market share and market dominance, things like that.
Mm-hmm. So the MEDDIC came from a collection of the country managers or the other sales leaders within PTC, and you kind of came together and said, this is the best practice. I kept doubling or doubling. Do you say doubling growth 40 quarters in a row? Did I write that down correctly?
Doubling every year, on a rhythm of doubling every year. But the growth was quarter after quarter, the most exponential, beautiful, or not exponential, geometric growth, actually. Quarter after quarter.
Amazing. And to maintain that, your sales team must have gotten significantly larger. And so this was you all coming together to try and say, okay, we've got all these new people coming on board. How do we teach them the ways that have worked for us?
Absolutely. Just to give you an example, when I started in France, there were 4 salespeople. So imagine the territory of France divided by 4, each at 4. And when I left, I had 27 salespeople for the same territory. So you can imagine that every quarter, every salesperson was seeing their territory cut in 2, divided in 2, but still, they were still able to make quota and succeed.
Wow, that is a lot. I mean, to split up France into 22 or 27 territories, you're getting pretty small, and you got to be pretty efficient with your customers if you're going to want to still hit your quota and still contribute to that growth.
Absolutely, and I'm sure every other company with high growth sees that. I mean, I know people who have salespeople who have just a few streets of New York City as territory, as long as they can sign deals and make quota reasonably with a reasonable effort. Everyone is happy.
And I'm 100%. And I want to get into kind of what MEDDIC is, but before we get into like the actual definition, it's a qualification framework, I guess, is how we use it. But I want to take it a step above that. Why is MEDDIC important in the first place?
Well, let me catch on that. It started with a qualification framework. What I would say that it's a qualification focused framework. It is a general framework. At least the way MEDDIC, I created MEDDIC because to be honest, I mean, those initial ideas right now in our curriculum represent maybe 20% or 30% of the course and the curriculum. There are a lot of other things which have been developed on top of those ideas, and an acronym like MEDDIC is just to have something like a checklist to remember, but the skills and the best practices and how to do it is a lot more than just a few words about metrics, economic buyer, etc., that everyone can see and easily notice.
Mm-hmm. Every time I sit to write or create some training for my AE, or I'm trying to walk him through something, I'll share 1 or 2 ideas, and naturally those kind of tie into other ideas, and then it's just you're down the rabbit hole, and we're like, wow, how did I get down here? I'm 3 pages deep, and I started talking about the economic decision maker. Like it's not just it's not bad, it's not anim, it goes quite a bit deeper in my experience.
That's right. That's right. There are a lot of, there are a series of very important points, notions, techniques, best practices, and then there's and this is what it is. But it's also, let's say, about what it is not. It is not a sales process. Each company needs to build their sales process once they learn MEDDIC. Let me give you an example. Obviously, I'm meeting with hundreds or thousands of salespeople every year, hundreds every quarter, and I'm seeing very different companies, very different products. MEDDIC applies to all of them. MEDDIC applies to all of them. But they have very different processes. For instance, in technology, when you have a SaaS, a software or something, many people do demos, which makes a lot of sense, obviously. And for some people, it makes sense to demo the product as soon as possible from the very first meeting. For some others, it doesn't make sense to make a demo before you have a deep discovery call with the prospect. So this is an example of the process. The process is saying, where do I start? Discovery call usually is the first thing to do. What are my criteria to get on a discovery call? What should I qualify for? Hopefully, it's a few things, people in the same industry, talking to the right persons, things like that. And then a further qualification criteria later. But my sales process could be different from a company to another. I help during the workshops. I help customers build that process. But this is something which, and this is something which can change in the life of a product. For instance, at PTC, at the beginning for the Pro Engineer product, which was extremely advanced at the time, we wouldn't qualify hard at the beginning, and we would demo the product as soon as possible. The first action would be to demo the product, because that would trigger an interest and an open conversation on many other things. And then a few years later, we had another product which was on the PLM, which was not that sexy to demonstrate. And we needed a more in-depth conversation on the pain and understanding their needs before presenting anything, if we decided to present. So the sales process can be totally different, yet using the MEDDIC framework. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a process for qualifying or for understanding and asking the right questions to a prospect, but it doesn't necessarily dictate the buyer's journey, the seller's journey, the stages that you're going to advance to, and the things that you're going to do along the way. It is something that's going to be generalized to many different sales processes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if MEDDIC or MEDDIC is something that helps me learn, the way I see it is it's something that helps me learn the right information about a prospect. I think what a lot of people that I talk to, when I talk to them about MEDDIC, they think, oh, it's a qualification framework. Great. If they have, if they're qualified, that means they're going to, I did air quotes for those listening on the podcast. If they're qualified, that means they're going to close, right? If they have full MEDDIC, we in our Salesforce, we rank it. We've got 0, 1, or 2, and we have I think 14 out of 14 is the best score. And so I look at, I've got a 14 out of 14 MEDDIC deal. Does that mean it's going to close 100%?
No. And even more than that, the qualification within, at least the way I envision it, is not a stage in the process, unlike what we had seen before MEDDIC, where you have a typical sales process, prospecting, qualifying, presenting, showing the proof, negotiating, and closing. That's not what I believe in, and that's why the title of the book is Always Be Qualifying. Qualification is not a stage; it's a state of mind. It's something which is permanent during the whole sales process, and obviously, it's more important at the beginning. It's less important towards the end. But we should always be qualifying through our questions. It's one thing is one good practice is always in our sales meeting tend to ask questions rather than talking and presenting. And even if you want to go somewhere, do it by asking questions instead of saying, we will be doubling your revenue. Thanks to our product, we'll double your revenue. Ask the question, how much revenue are you having right now? And how could it double? What should change in order to double? These are questions which will lead the prospect to get to your statement. Remember that when you are questioning, it's about them. Mm-hmm. When you're stating, it's about you. And that's the switch we want to create when it is not already in the skills of the salesperson.
And I love your idea about always being qualifying. I think one of the biggest popular ideas that I absolutely hate is the idea of the MQL or the SQL, because it puts this finite yes or no binary outcome on this thing that is inherently non-binary. It is, are they qualified or not? It's like, well, define what qualified means. Okay, are they the right person? Are they this? Are they that? And inevitably somebody says, oh, and they got to have a project in the next 90 days. They need to be able to buy from me right now. And the reason I hate this so much is I've seen it a million times. And two, it's caused so many salespeople to waste so much money, myself included. If it's not qualified, it means it's not worth putting in pipeline. It means it's never worth following up again. And this is how you get this big trash pile / gold mine in your CRM that nobody's looking at because it's covered in trash, but it's actually a pile of gold underneath there. And so many salespeople miss this. So many sales teams miss this, that you shouldn't just be taking a one and done approach to the customer. It is not just an opportunity to earn a commission check this month or this quarter. It is an opportunity to help somebody. And we should not draw the distinction between I'm only going to help you now if you can give me some money now. It's if my company can serve you eventually, I'm here to help set up that conversation, even if it takes 2 or 3 years.
Right. Absolutely. And let me, on that, totally to the point, let me observe something. Obviously, many people compare MEDDIC to bands, which is more transactional, but there are some common points, obviously, and two of them, BANT, budget, authority, need, and timing. And notice that 2 of them are absent in MEDDIC, and one is budget, and the other one is timing. Authority, we can say that's the economic buyer, more or less. The need, we can say that's the identification of the pain, more or less. But how come in MEDDIC we don't care about the budget and we don't care about the timing? And that's something that those experienced salespeople who notice this for the first time and say, oh, they don't have the budget, so we walk away. Wait a minute. No. If they have the pain, and if you manage to quantify the pain and talk to the right person, you don't need budget. Let me say something here, Collin. Salespeople, 90% of salespeople, or at least, or maybe 95% of those who haven't been to our workshop, very selfishly, think that they are in the mindset of the salesperson asking, demanding, begging the prospect for a meeting, for a call back, and pushing. No. If the salesperson understands that they are the catalyst who are bringing a source of productivity, a source of profit to the prospect, they turn the table. They switch the roles. The prospects, why do prospects buy technology? We are in technology, I mean, at least at this pace, at least since the beginning of the 80s, or let's say early 90s, worst case. Decades of automation that have been driven by improving productivity and increasing profit. There's only one reason B2B customers buy. It's because they want to increase their profit, either by reducing costs or by increasing revenue or by mitigating risk. These are the 3 areas where MEDDIC can help. Increasing revenue, reducing costs, mitigating risk. There are no fourth way to improve things. And so if they are doing this, and we have experience of everyday customers doing this, then they will be doing it regardless of the salesperson's actions, right? They want it. The salespersons, all they are doing is to be a catalyst, is helping in this process, clarifying how this can help them become more profitable. So when a salesperson sees themselves as that king bringing those benefits to the prospect, it gives them more confidence, and it makes them in a situation of a win-win. They are also have to qualify. They should like the prospect just as the prospects likes them. We move from a master-slave relationship into a win-win relationship.
I love the framing there. It's something that I used to use when I was cold calling, and my boss showed it to me. This was a very long time ago, 20 years or so. And I said, I don't want to cold call. I don't want to interrupt these folks. And he said, well, think about what you're selling. I was selling wheelchair egress lifts. And I'm like, I don't want to call another church. I don't want to call another community center. And Mike sat there and he's like, listen, you're selling wheelchair egress lifts. What are these things here for? I was like, wow, they're to help, people in wheelchairs get out of a building that's on fire. He's like, great. So for every call you don't make, there's potentially one person who's going to get stuck in a church, in a community center. He's like, do you want to leave them there? And that changed my whole thinking on cold calling, because now I wasn't just trying to get some commission and earn my, $150 from selling this thing. I was thinking about this one person, and we had somebody in a chair at our office, Paul, and I was like, shit, I got to make sure that there are no Pauls left behind. Now it was a mission, right? It was, I can still feel it. I can still remember that conversation. And this was 20 odd years ago.
Love it. Love it. That leader, that managers you had is a typical infinite sales leader that I have in my new course about. In one of the points of leadership, and one of the tips, there are a lot of nuggets, and one of them is the belief. First of all, noticing that most successful salespeople believe in what they are doing. They see it as a mission, and if they see it as a mission, they are going to be unstoppable. And now, so I think on this, everyone will agree. Now, as a leader, how do we create belief in our new salespeople? And that is something that I share in my Infinite Sales Leadership course. How to create belief.
I love it. Just sales just runs right through you. I love it so much. I want to get into, and we will get into the Infinite Sales Leader at the end, and because I do have some questions, and I'm very curious. I wanted to get into MEDDIC because in our pre-interview you said something really interesting, and I think it might have been a piece that I've missed, and some people might have missed when I first learned about MEDDIC, which was your comment. I think it summarized the business outcome or the business case, which is every day that passes, the prospect is missing out on this amount of money. And the way you framed it up, it was this like, of course, that's what we're trying to build towards. We're trying to build the business case, but I hadn't really tied it together, business case and MEDDIC. Obviously, the core components are there. Help me understand how you get there.
Great, with pleasure. Yes, this is one of the key moments in our workshops, but happy to give, obviously we can't do that all in a short period of time here, but I will give the outline so your audience can see where we do it. The first thing is to identify the KPIs that matter for whatever you're selling. For instance, I'm selling sales training. So the KPIs which matter for my customers are sales cycle, their sales cycle. We want to reduce their sales cycle. The average contract value, we want to increase their average contract value. Forecast accuracy, we want to increase the forecast accuracy rate. Win rate, we want to increase their win rate. So these are KPIs that matter. And when I am having a conversation with the CROs who are looking into implementing MEDDIC, these are some of the questions I ask them. It's also a way for me to see how much they are on top of their business, qualifying them. So for each business, we have these KPIs which are known for the customer. And each of these KPIs has an impact in the bottom line. So again, the average contract value, if it can be doubled, it means doubling the revenue. The win rate is not doesn't have a direct impact, but the win rate has an impact on the sales productivity, which leads to increase of revenue. But there is also a equation, a mathematic relationship between this KPI and the result. So first thing is to connect those KPIs to dollars, to bottom line profit. And then a little bit of math in order to relate it to it's related to a year. You bring it down to a month, a week, or a day. So, for instance, let's say a customer who is believing that MEDDIC can help them divide their sales cycle by 2. That means doubling the revenue because the sales productivity is going to double. That means doubling the revenue. So let's say they are making $20 million a year. And thanks to MEDDIC, they will be moving to $40 million within a year or so. And then I invite them to be conservative. Let's say you are wrong, and the impact is not doubling unlike your expectations. You end up only increasing by 20%. So we increase the revenue by 20%. That 20% divided by the number of open days in a year, which is approximately 200 open working days in a year, gives you, for instance, if it's a $20 million increase thanks to the training and that thanks to the processes and new implementation, everything, $20 million divided by 200, that is $100,000 a day. $100,000 a day of gain. Okay, now let's say the prospect is convinced. It's very interesting. Let's see how when we implement it. That's I'm giving an example of things that I have really seen. And they say, okay, well, we're getting into summer now, end of the quarter, summer now. Let's plan this for September. Wait a minute. We are today, May 30th. And you accept and agree that every day passing, there is an opportunity of $100,000 that you are missing, that you are not taking. How can you reasonably wait for 4 months before making a decision or before implementing this? And that's where they realize that every day passing, there is a lack of opportunity. And this is common sense. Think about it, Collin. Again, we mentioned that customers buy technology because they believe there is a profit. And there is a profit because otherwise, most of these technologies are SaaS. They would stop after a year or two, right? And if they are ongoing, it's because they see the profit. So if they are making this decision for that profit, calculate what is the daily amount of that profit. And make them feel that every day passing, when they are postponing, they are planning to do this within a few months or within a few weeks. That's what they are postponing. They are delaying the day they start seeing the profit. So
I love that.
It applies to everyone.
Mm-hmm. I think I like it so much because it's one of the areas that I'm the most Canadian about, the most kind and like, I'm here to serve the customer and a little less pressure. I do try and help them understand the business case. So we definitely do go into depth on that and that, we're kind of going into it. But I think this is, as you're saying this, I'm like, this is one area that I can do a little bit better job of and just kind of ratcheting this up 10%. And we spent a bunch of time getting to this point. I want to take us back to, we've talked a lot about MEDDIC or MEDDPIC. I want to talk about the individual pieces, because if you're still listening and you don't know what MEDDIC is, you're a champion. And thank you for sticking with us. Let's jump into can you help me? Let's just define each of the MEDDIC criteria or MEDDPICC criteria, and then we can kind of go into, we'll kind of loop through one at a time, starting with metric. So, yeah.
Right.
Help me understand.
Metrics, the idea, first of all, the concept behind metrics is that everything which is quantifiable is more convincing, is Aristotle's rhetoric principle of logos, ethos, and pathos. In order for something which is logical, logos, and that's how you convince people. Art of persuasion is the title of the rhetoric. You need to be logical about it, and numbers bring the logic. So whenever you're presenting anything, try to present with numbers. That's a principle. Now, in terms of sales, there are at least two areas of where metrics help. One is other customers close to this prospect, what they have achieved in terms of numbered, quantified benefits. And the other one is this same prospect, what is the cost of the pain they are, which is the reason they are talking to us. The very first thing is to understand their pain. And then the second thing is, what is the cost of this pain? That's metrics.
And if I help just anybody who's listening, because I get a little bit dyslexic when I try to put it all together. So if we go through MEDDPICC, metric, or M is metric, E is economic buyer, D is decision criteria, then decision process, paper process, identified pain, competition, champion.
Thank you.
Did I get all those right?
For mentioning this. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I sometimes get them backwards. So metric is how you measure, but you said it's intimately connected to the identified pain. So let's go to identified pain. Talk to me about what that is.
Absolutely. There's a joke on MEDDIC is that, it's so obvious that we should always start with the pain that it's only the eye of the medic somewhere towards the end. Don't ask me why. So the pain is the reason why the prospect is talking to us, either an inbound call or their acceptance of an outbound call. Then the economic buyer is the person who has access to the funds, either something budgeted that they can release, or something which is not budgeted, but where they are high enough to argue and take it from someone else's budget. One of the key things that we work on is, well, first of all, noticing that sometimes salespeople say, the customer said the project is on hold for this year. We had other priorities, and we are going to move it to next year. That usually means that there was a smarter sales rep, MEDDPICC trained, who managed to get your budget for their expenses. And that's also another proof that something which is not budgeted can absolutely be decided if you manage to quantify the pain point and prove the benefit. Because we're not asking for money. Remember, we are the catalyst who help them profit. So thinking budget it doesn't make sense. That's the economic buyer. Decision criteria, that's very important. It's a little bit subjective. So some sales will have challenges with it, but it's one of the most important things. Decision criteria is according to what criteria I'm buying. And that right there can make a whole difference and tell the prospect, I'm going with this vendor no matter what, no matter how good the salesperson is, because my criteria is this. Let's say, for instance, imagine 15 years ago, where Google Docs G Suite was introduced as cloud-based, and Microsoft was not yet on the cloud. And a prospect wants to buy word processing. If their criteria, if one of the key elements of their criteria is to have a natively cloud-based solution so that they can seamlessly collaborate together on the product, they are indirectly saying, I want to buy Google Docs.
Right.
And that's very important for the salesperson to know at the beginning. So that's an important qualification criteria. Now, when the criteria, yes.
Oh, I was just going to say, can I build on that? Because I'm a visual thinker, and I always think of when I get to decision criteria, I think of the customer's pain in sort of like a shape. I'll ask my reps, I'm like, what is the shape of their pain? And when I say shape, I'm thinking about I think it's called a radar plot or radar graph. If you've seen those like weird hexagonal, octagonal kind of like graphs that go around, there's 11 points or 15 points or 7 points. You see them in consultants' charts and Gartner things all the time. And those are plotting all of the different, benefits or features or things that they could do. And you could think about it as jobs to be done or pain points or benefits. But I always think of decision criteria of like, what are the key points of my product or of the problem space that are like, what are all of them? And then on a scale of like 1 to 5, how does the prospect rate, all of these? And from there you get a shape. And then what I'm looking for is like, does the shape of their problem match the shape of our solution? And that's the kind of fit I'm looking for. Does that kind of resonate with you, or am I just off in la la land?
Oh no, 100%. That's it. And there are a lot of visuals actually in the book and in the course. There are several visuals. One of the visuals is the most famous one that I personally contributed to creating and expanding is the value triangle. The value triangle is the prospect as one in one summit of the triangle, us in one of the corners of the summits of the triangle, the lower left, and then our competitor on the lower right side. And then the prospect is expressing some needs, features, and preferences. And the triangle is creating zones depending on, for instance, a requirement that the prospect is expressing that we both answer positively, or that we answer positively and the competitor is not. This one, we are calling it a differentiator, a key differentiator, because we can do it and they can't. And there could be something that they are expressing that the competitor is having and we don't have. We call it the danger zone. So when we receive these criteria, we have an assessment to make. Is that what are the areas? What is the danger zone? What are the lines which are in the danger zone? What are the lines which are in our differentiator? What is the custom development? No one can do it. Where is the boring part? Because everyone can do it. So there are different zones in that value triangle, which is hard to explain in a podcast. But I invite everyone. It's on YouTube, a video on YouTube. Type value triangle, search for value triangle. MEDDIC Academy. You will have a YouTube explaining it. So
right. I'll track down a link and I'll throw it in the show notes. If anybody's listening or looking for that, check the show notes and I'll make sure there's a link there for you.
Great. And other visuals, another visual that in the book and see is the playing field being level or tilt. This is like a soccer field where if the criteria are not set in your favor, it's hard to win that game. And other visuals. There are 2 or 3 other visuals which help seeing that. Now, what to do with it? Sometimes when we are seeing decision criteria which are totally written for someone else and literally written by someone else because your competitor has been there talking to
got
them.
there first.
Exactly, and sharing white papers and things like that. They are literally using the vocabulary of your competitor. That doesn't sound good. So in the course, we give more details of how to do that. But in a nutshell, you would create doubts and say, hey, how come my customer who is having these huge, great metrics and benefits doing these results, achieving these results without having that feature? So maybe that feature or that vocabulary that you're mentioning in your criteria is not that important. How about that? So creating some doubt in there. Mm-hmm. Or when there is something that we have as a key differentiator which doesn't come up in their decision criteria. And you are, again, explaining, if you talk to our customers who have done these achievements, these great metrics, they say it's all thanks to that feature. How come you're not asking for it? How come it's not showing as something mandatory? Because you know that if this gets into the decision criteria, it means the elimination of those two other competitors.
Interesting. So you can kind of see, what does my radar plot look like against theirs? And then how do I make sure that I'm kind of positioning ourselves really well?
Absolutely. So one is the observation, the analysis, as you mentioned, and the other is what we do with it. So influencing them. We are trying to influence them so that their expression of needs matches with our features, the characteristics of our solution. If we are successful, if we have a champion, we can do it, and we improve the probability of signing the deal. If we are not, if the criteria are not in our favor, and we are unable to influence them and change them, we should walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Decision criteria, decision process is the next one, is where the customer, how the buyer sees the process in this interaction until signature. That's the second D. Identify, we already mentioned it. MEDDIC with the second P is the paper process. Paper process can be a pain by itself. The security audit, procurement, legal, terms and conditions. Sometimes there are big problems. We better talk about them earlier than going through 6 months of sales cycle and see a huge problem at the end. We need to start talking about them sooner. And in some situations saying it's not worth it. I actually have I think it's a Fortune 30, Fortune 50 customer, global, huge company, contacted us 2 weeks ago for training. And they have requirements in terms of paperwork, which is not worth our time. So we respectfully declined. We didn't even get on a meeting. We're not interested. My time, the salesperson's time, is key. And here's another thing, if I may, Collin. I hope it's not too long.
Go for it. No. Help yourself.
Many salespeople think that an inbound call, an inquiry, and everything which is showing in their pipeline or their CRM, attributed or assigned to them, is for them to work on. It's not. People should understand, salespeople should understand that their success rate has nothing to do with the rate of the deals that they convert, but the rate of the deals on which they work and invest that convert. So if there is an opportunity which is not qualified, get rid of it fast. Don't let it taking your time, because your time, your success rate is on the deals on which you work. So if you bring in to the equation a deal which a low chance of success, you are reducing your success rate.
And you're reducing your reliability rate. If you roll that up to your boss and say, yeah, this one's in my pipeline, I think it's real, If you want to double click on this idea, we've got an episode that's probably out by the time this comes out. Jeremy Painkin, fantastic. We go into his forecasting process. He uses MEDDIC or MEDDPIC, and he has a lot of structure around the process. It's fantastic.
Absolutely, yes. So back to those elements and the acronym part. The P, we explained it, and finally the two C's. One stands for champion, and the other one is a competition. Now, champion is also something that even some senior salespeople don't always get it, even though it's quite clear. We say that no champion, no deal. There is 100% of the deals are managed by a champion. And sometimes people say in my workshops, but we don't always have a champion. They need to buy it and say, okay, wait a minute. And sometimes the CEO is in the room, the CRO is in the room, obviously, most of the time. And I turn to the CEO and say, have you ever invested anything in your company, my client, in your company, without anyone in your teams asking for it? Of course not. Well, there's always someone who asks the economic buyer to invest in something in any company. That person is the champion. Now, if a salesperson thinks that they have signed something without a champion, it's because you're not aware of that champion doing the job, which is a shame. But it is that there is always someone who has asked for it at a minimum. Maybe they didn't have to fight for it, but very often they have to give some justification, explanations why we need to buy this. So there's always a champion.
Somebody is that internal catalyst. You use that word. I love that. I think that's such an appropriate word. What is the catalyst for change? And there has to be, the salesperson aids in that process and helps kind of shape that. But there's got to be that internal catalyst as well.
That's right. Now, for the champion, there is also one characteristic, is that they need to be influential, they need to be respected and credible in the account, they need to have access to different people, including the economic buyer. They need to like us, obviously, to be considered as our champion. They need to recommend us. But there is also one last thing, which is sometimes downplayed or ignored, is their personal win. Why does a champion bother? Why does a champion doing this? It's because there is something for them. Usually it's because they will sleep better at night once this problem is solved in the company. Usually it's because, or sometimes it's because they are an ambitious person in the company and they want a good reason to improve things so that they get a promotion or they get a bonus or they are well seen in the company and they can shine and be brilliant there. There is always a reason why people like us, and it goes back to them.
Love it. Last one is the competition.
Yeah, competition. It's we need to know who we are competing with, even if it could be sometimes an internal solution, a way to do it without buying from anyone, or just sticking with what they have, or making no decision and delaying the decision. So our strategy will be different based on those competitors we are talking about. And also knowing the competitor will allow us to always ask the question, who is championing the competitor? If this person is our champion, there should be someone who is championing for the competitor.
Interesting.
And the stronger champion wins. Very obvious.
I like that. And it's interesting because the one thing I hadn't connected before is that by learning who your competition is in this opportunity, it also tells you something about the decision criteria and which ones you're likely to come up against and which ones are likely to be they are considering. To go back to your kind of word processing example, if they're looking at a cloud solution, and they're also looking at some like document signing, They're like, okay, well, they both kind of do words in the cloud, but what is the real important piece? Is it signing the contracts or is it sharing the documents? This is kind of a stretched example, but it'll tell you if you look at, if you are that document signing and you're like, oh, shoot, we're up against Google Docs, it might tell you that their decision criteria are something that either you've totally missed or are much, much wider than you initially thought.
100%. Yeah, remember when we were talking about the decision criteria, one visual is that value triangle, and it's us and the competitors on the summits, on the two lower summits. So absolutely, yes.
I love that. I'm curious, and we've kind of gone into each of these. I've definitely gone through these on previous episodes, and so if you want to check out a little bit more in depth in terms of like what is actually the MEDDIC or the criteria and how Jamie Buss the episode with Jamie Buss is really, really great. I want to get into something that we didn't touch on in the Jamie Buss episode or the Jeremy Pankin episode. Jeremy, we talked about kind of how they do the forecast and the importance of MEDDIC. What I'm curious about is somebody like, I was thinking about this episode and I'm like, what is the unique conversation I can have with Darius that I can't have with anybody else? And I think the thing that you've seen the most is implementations of MEDDIC. And so what are if somebody's sitting here listening going, cool, I want to do this, should they just go add it into their Salesforce and add a score and go? Like, what are some of the best practices? What are some things to watch out for when you go about implementing this?
Oh my God, yes, that's extremely important. First of all, there are several things, obviously. First of all, the leadership engagement. It needs to be a leader initiative. The leader needs to be convinced. Gladly, they are not a lot of them, but it does happen in some of my workshops where the CRO is not even present. The CRO is not taking the course themselves. That's not a good leadership best practice. They are not showing the example, and then they cannot be part of the new language, because one of the benefits of MEDDIC and MEDDPIC in any company, the very first benefit everyone is seeing is a common language. Who is our champion? Are we talking to the champion? Or is this person is the champion? Or did we get access to the economic buyer? When is the meeting with the economic buyer? What are the metrics here? So this common language helps even with customer success, even with solution engineers, even with consultants, not just salespeople. So leadership and the leadership from the beginning, from the day they are looking into usually external help in order to implement the training itself, and then they implement the methodology and the framework in the company. They need to be involved, and even sales enablement. I mean, a lot of former senior experienced salespeople are in sales enablement. Sometimes there are more junior people with not that much experience of sales. Sales enablement is not necessarily enough. And that goes hand in hand with those CROs who say, okay, sales enablement is going to take care of the training. It's a bit like parents who wouldn't look into what my kids are learning and would say, okay, that's the teacher's job. I totally delegate that to the school and the teacher, and don't worry about that. I believe not. As a parent, you need to be on top of it together with those teachers and have making sure that, what your values are, if at least your kids being exposed to them. They adopt it or they don't adopt it, but they need to be exposed to them. Same thing. The second one is, and you mentioned it perfectly, Collin, I have been preaching for technology and automation during all my career. I graduated in 1985, and I've been selling technology all my career until MEDDIC Academy in 2017, where I am onto the skills building and habit building. For this, I am an anti-tool guy, meaning that you cannot fix it with tools. And we have to be very cautious about that for many reasons. I actually, just before this podcast, at the customer meeting, a global company with hundreds of salespeople around the globe, and one of the country managers was in the meeting, was saying, when are we going to have this in Salesforce? And I said, wait, no rush. You don't want to have beautiful scorecards and dashboards in Salesforce saying your salespeople are using MEDDIC because they are checking boxes. No, that is actually dangerous. What you want to focus on is on their skills, on their assessment, the ability to assess a deal. When they are saying that I have metrics, do they really have metrics? When they are saying that I have a strong champion, do they really have a champion? And it needs to be, we talked about it earlier, the passion, the belief, when they believe that I do need a strong champion to win this deal, then they will go and find that they are honest with themselves, saying, I'm not having that strong champion yet. Let's work on it. Hey, manager, please help me. Based on your experience, how can we convert this guy who is not convinced? Or how can we find someone else who can be our champion as this is ongoing and we're still not progressing that much? Focusing on skills and not on the dashboards and tools. And by the way, I open a quick parenthesis, is that I think this is very important, and it's the number one reason that quota attainment in the past 20 years has been decreasing year after year. I remember years in the 90s, both at PTC and other companies, Oracle, in a normal, sane sales organization, we had roughly maybe 70% of the team who would achieve quota, who would do more than 100% quota. Today, we're not seeing that anymore. Today, I think the number of people who are achieving quota is like 20% or even less in many organizations. Do you agree with that?
I mean, especially in 2024, I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think you could argue that PTC growing, 40 quarters in a row, you hit on a market need that's going to pull the solution into the market, right? And a company like that, any company that's on that trajectory, is going to be really, there's more demand than there are your ability to fulfill that demand. And so you're going to have high quota attainment rates. I do think there are likely to be companies that are out here right now that have those. But I'd say on the whole, not everybody is on one of those trajectories. And so, yeah, I could see that across the board, with more software solutions being out there, quota attainment being way down.
Yeah, you're right. Of course, there's always the economy factor, how the general economy in a country, in a region, in the world, in an industry, in a segment of work, of course. But all those aside, I mean, it's not me saying there are studies showing that the quota attainment is decreasing. I'm not saying on my own, and there are certainly reasons, and I think one of them is this: people are relying on tools, on automation. I mean, look at the emails that we receive every day from someone wanting to sell us something.
Totally agree.
It's just.
I think so many people have forgotten that it's the people, process, technology. The people come first, and the people have to be trained. Then you have to have a strong process, and the people have to be trained on the process. And then you buy technology to enable the process. And it has to happen in that order. If you have the wrong people, the right process, and the right technology, it's not going to work. If you have the right people, the wrong process, the right technology, it's not going to you're going to be using, the process will be enabling the wrong, or the technology will be enabling the wrong process. And if you have the right people and the right process and you don't have the right technology, you could still do a good enough job. You just won't be able to maximize the outcome of the opportunity.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you for that summarizing. So back to those success factors, I would say these top two, if these top two are done properly, leadership engagement and focusing on building skills and on the salespersons instead of tools for this particular case, then we have advanced. And then there are other factors such as having a champion inside who will transform the methodology, the framework into their own process, the sales process being adapted. Companies have already established companies, those with larger organizations, they have already a process. Then they will include the MEDDIC language in their process. For instance, they will decide we shouldn't do a POC before having metrics and before having met the economic buyer, for instance. So they put that in that order. And smaller teams or startups with a few salespersons where they don't have the process, they can do some trial error with that process. As an entrepreneur myself, we have, I can say that founders have some ideas of what they will be doing. They project it. They imagine the sales process. They go for it. But they are, most of them, very flexible, understanding that this may be wrong and being able to question it regularly and redo that sales process based on the field experience, what they are seeing from the customers and prospects' reactions.
100%. It's a trial and error. There is no one magic bullet or magic system of do this, then do that, because it has to line up with the qualification. You have to weave the qualification framework, methodology into your pre-existing sales process, which ideally is built on your buyer's process. And so that's why it's all, a little bit of how long is a piece of string. You've got to make it work and make it fit on an individual company by company basis. I really appreciate you giving us so much time today. It's been amazing to get a chance to learn a little bit more about the journey, a little bit more about MEDDIC, and answer some of the questions. I got two pieces that I'm going to do differently moving forward. And so thank you so much for coming on the show. You've mentioned the new Infinite Sales Leader course. I want you to tell us a little bit about it. If people are curious about it, what is it and where can they find it?
Fantastic. So after MEDDIC, I mean, of course, I'm still doing a lot of MEDDIC and MEDDIC for the sales teams. I noticed, as we just talked about it, that the leaders are also missing some stuff. And the same way that an enterprise or a tech salespeople, they are not trained. There is no training in business schools. There's no training in universities to become a salesperson. So that's why MEDDIC exists. And I wouldn't create the MEDDIC Academy if those universities were able to educate people on that. Well, it's even more for the leadership part of it. And we were saying that the leaders need to be engaged on it. They gave examples that some are not in a workshop. That this is so obvious, but there are a lot more. So the course is, it's called Infinite Sales because it's a circle starting with hiring, building sales teams, starting with hiring, what should be the criteria of a salesperson, how a salesperson is different. And most of these, as in my other courses, are not giving the theory or something which is found in general literature. For instance, on the hiring, I'm not repeating things that can be found easily online with YouTube, etc. But on the things that could be controversial in even some situations. For a salesperson, for instance, salespersons who have grit and self-motivation are successful. And so how do we find grit practically in a person by reading their resume and within an interview? Or another example is people are successful, in my opinion, more because of their education or place of birth or ethnicity or any other thing, but the decisions they made at different stages of time, more than their degrees or past experience. Their decision-making ability makes them successful or not. Now, once we agree on that, how do we assess people in their decision-making excellence? By reading resumes. So there's a whole chapter on recruiting. And then sometimes leaders are appointed in a new job they have not built, and they will not be allowed to hire for a while. So there's also at least 40% of the course focusing on developing. How do we develop? And one of them is that creating belief. How do we create the belief? How do I transform someone who is just doing a 9 to 5 as a salesperson into someone who gets passionate about what they are doing and believe in what they are doing, and how to coach them, how to develop them, how to make them accountable and responsible for their experience or for their results, how to motivate them, how to even and the things that sometimes we escape from, which is how to punish between quotes, obviously, how to make it in a decent way so that someone who has not been delivering sees the impact of what they are doing so that they become more successful next quarter. What are they losing because of lack of performance here? How to set goals, which are the goals for performance, obviously, but also for activity, and how to connect these set of goals. There can be excuses for not achieving results, but there shouldn't be excuses for not delivering the activity goals. And so that's a lot of things which are quite uncommon. I made my market study. I checked into large MBA leadership courses and curriculums at Harvard and Columbia, and also large private education institutions. And I didn't find anything specific to enterprise sales, as an extension, the managers of MEDDIC. Of course, within the MEDDIC, within MEDDIC Academy, since a few years ago, we do have MEDDIC for managers. We have MEDDIC for trainers. So there are courses for managers in order to help teams who are within the framework of MEDDIC. But the Infinite Sales Leadership goes well beyond that. It applies to leaders regardless of the framework.
Awesome. I've included some links to the course, to your website, and some of our old podcasts. If people are looking to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can reach out?
Fantastic. LinkedIn, Darius Lahoutifard. By the way, my handler on LinkedIn is linkedin.com/in/MEDDIC, MEDDIC.
Love it.
And YouTube, some videos are on YouTube. I haven't been very active lately, but it's the handler at YouTube, youtube.com/@MEDDIC, MEDDIC again. So those are the best ways to get in touch. And of course, MEDDIC Academy MEDDIC.academy. So it's not a .com, it's not a .net, it's MEDDIC.academy, the website.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see you all next week.